All right, everyone, it's time to talk about arguably the heaviest lift of the college app process, the essay. Of course, we don't mean it'll be your heaviest lift writing, parents, because you won't be the ones writing, but rather it's the trickiest part to know how to support your students.
So true. And so we want to start with a list of what colleges they're wanting so that you have really good context for where that essay plugs in. First of all, the transcript. This is the single most important part. It's a baseline for all the decisions that are made. Test scores, if they're applicable, if they're accepted, if they're required, depending on the school. Resume and activities, what your student has done in high school. Of course, major selection, if applicable, even if that's undecided. And then the essays. Using this applications will paint an entire picture of the student, right? From their performance in the classroom to their personality. And that's really what admissions officers are looking for.
So the essays matter for a number of reasons, one of which is it's a chance to be seen, and I'd say a choice of how you're going to be seen, right?
Mhm.
When we're looking at admissions applications, it's always interesting to see, of course, how the student writes, but then what they're choosing to tell us, what they think is the most important part of their story, their experience. I love hearing it in the student's own authentic voice, and hint, hint, parents, this is a note we can usually tell, or at least we think you can, when there's been too much parent involvement in editing. So really getting to hear from the actual students. This is the one part of the essay that's not super numeric, right? Like grades or test scores or even number of hours of community service. It's really a personal look at who the student is. So it encompasses their life story, their experiences, and in the holistic admissions review process that Kelsey just mentioned, in the post-SCOTUS world, college admissions officers are really looking more carefully than ever to find out who is this student, what's their identity, what are the important experiences and backgrounds that they're bringing to our campus.
So true. And so we'll see how all of that changes post affirmative action in the coming year. But I do think it's going to be a different kind of a year for absolutely everybody. So parents, when do you support? And then we'll talk a little bit about how. First and foremost, when your child asks for that help. And I'll take it a step further. Ask your child, if they ask for help, what kind of feedback they're looking for, right? Do they want big picture content feedback? Does this sound like me? Is this, a really good kind of demonstration of who I am? Or are they looking just for some grammatical edits? No matter what it is that they're looking for, make sure to really respect that boundary. Second, really early in the process. This is a really important key. And then, thirdly, if you notice that your child is struggling, and a note here, no matter how much great support your child has in or out of the home, be sure to stay tuned in as a parent. And if you notice that your child is struggling, get some help. Then the third thing is a few weeks before submission. And that's a really great time to support with essays. The reason being that if it's a few weeks out, there may really still be some good time for your student to make significant content reworks if you're noticing that the story that they've chosen really doesn't reflect who you see them to be or doesn't reflect them in a positive way. But if it's 1 to 2 days before they need to submit, or even just 1 to 2 hours, I want you to force yourself to say something nice. Even if you're kind of dying inside and it's the worst thing you've ever read, you want to keep that feedback light and focused on technicalities, maybe misplaced commas, spelling. They can do some reordering of paragraphs that if that helps the flow. But that major content feedback, when your child doesn't actually have time and they have to submit right now, will only knock down their confidence in their own work and cause them more stress without actually giving them a chance to improve it. And I'll just say, if you want to avoid these situations, give us a call, because this is probably the number one thing that we hear is that the feedback lands differently from a parent than it does from somebody outside of the home. So James, talk to us a little bit about, you've worked on essays forever with students. How do you advise parents to support with essays?
Yeah, so it is, Kelsey, as you said, it's a little bit of a different landscape helping from the outside perspective versus a parent. But for parents, I would say first, work lightly with the student. It's important to downshift from that fix, fix, fix mentality to think about how can I help my student move forward.
Mhm.
Of course, as Kelsey alluded to earlier, keeping it positive. Remember that often teenagers have a criticism filter on everything they hear. If you say, like, oh, I'm not really sure what this means, what they hear is like, this is awful, horrible, I can't believe you wrote this. So, in terms of specific phrasing, sometimes that's things that can be helpful for parents. Things I would recommend leaning into that can be positive and help the students see where they can improve is I really like this part here, this sentence or this phrase because, and then fill it in like, I know it to be true about you, or it really shows your X. Um, Questions can really be helpful. Like, what are the things you feel proud of in this essay? And it allows the student to reflect on what they do like about it. Or when I read this essay, I learned that you something something. Does that match up with what you wanted to show? And it'll give them the perspective of, a reader got X and I was wanting to show that, or the reader got X and I was trying to show Y. How can I adjust that to better demonstrate the aspects of me that I want to show?
Mhm. Mhm.
It's really important, of course, but especially in the essays, to actively listen to what they say that their essay needs. So if they just want help with grammar and spelling, don't give feedback about like moving paragraphs around and reconsidering the topic. Um, of keeping in line with that positive feedback, reflect where you see them shine. So things like, whenever I need help with X, I know that you're going to have the answer, letting the student know where you see them as an expert and helping them see if they can incorporate that into the essay, or telling them, I'm thinking about you and how you're applying to college, and I was thinking of all the amazing ways that I've seen you do this. You have
Mhm.
so much to offer. So framing whatever you're saying with that positivity. Um, I could promise you, and I've worked with students for quite a long time, as Kelsey said, that positive truths are much more effective in helping the student move forward than anything else.
Such great advice, James. We're all lucky to be learning from your wisdom pearls. So, before we kind of close things out, I want to just give a nod to the four most common parental unit mistakes, which shouldn't be a surprise to anyone watching now that you've watched most of this. First of all, taking over the essay process. Keep in mind that this is all about showing the student's voice, showing that personal flavor. And if it's not written by them, whatever that means, then it isn't going to show that. Number two is not listening to your student, really not respecting that it's your process. And when you don't listen to them, when you do take over, you give them the message that you don't believe in them, actually. So keep that in mind. We know that you believe in your child. We know that you're working to push them forward, and keep these things in mind. Number three is allowing your child to procrastinate. There's so much work that has to be done in this process. It needs to be spread out over time to be able to be done well. And then number four, in line with what James just said, just kind of that overly critical feedback. We really notice over the years that when you're overly critical too soon, the student stops trusting, they stop asking for help, and they shut down. Whereas if you're able to give them reasons to move in one direction as opposed to another, they can really shine and they can move forward easily. Well, I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us. We have an events filled summer, so stay tuned to thecollege.org/events, and we hope to see you watching our next stream. Thanks,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thanks for coming.